Alright, जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम everybody, welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we will be discussing the topical MCQs of AS level biology 9700, which is from the chapter of biological molecules. Alright, so I already told you that the topical MCQs of biological molecules will be divided into so many videos. One will be on the testing of biological molecules, which I believe I have already covered in my previous YouTube videos, and then there will be one video on the topical MCQs of carbohydrates, then there will be one video on the topical MCQs of lipids, then there will be one video on the topical MCQs of proteins, and then there will be a video on the topical MCQs of the water. अच्छा, नाउ जैसे कि टेस्टिंग ऑफ द बायोलॉजिकल मॉलिक्यूल्स में आई डिवाइडेड दिस इनटू 2 वीडियोस. इसी तरह आई बिलीव के लिपिड्स के भी एमसीक्यूज ज़्यादा हैं, सो इट विल आल्सो बी डिवाइडेड इनटू 2 वीडियोस. एंड देन प्रोटीन्स का भी यही है कि शायद ये भी 2 वीडियोस के अंदर चला जाए. ऑलराइट, सो नाउ लेट्स मूव ऑन टू क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 ओवर हियर. In this video, basically we are going to be solving the topical MCQs of the carbohydrate, right? So now let's move on to question number 1 over here. Question number 1 over here from the carbohydrates is from October-November 2020, paper 1 to question 8. It says that which pair of monosaccharides forms the sucrose. Alright, so before we do this, हमें जो है वो एक बेसिक नॉलेज होनी चाहिए अबाउट दी कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स. कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स में हमारे पास जो क्लासिफिकेशन होती है कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स की, इट इज़ बेसिकली इनटू मोनोसैकेराइड्स, द डाइसैकेराइड्स एंड द पॉलीसैकेराइड्स. तो हम लोग इसको वन बाय वन डिस्कस कर लेंगे कि मोनोसैकेराइड्स में हमारे पास ग्लूकोज आ जाता है, फ्रक्टोज आ जाता है, एंड देन गैलेक्टोज आ जाता है, राइट. एंड देन the monosaccharides are there and then comes the disaccharides. Now disaccharides में हमारे पास जो है it is made up of 2 monomers, right? 2 different monomers, or it can be made up of the 2 same monomers as well. For example, maltose, sucrose and lactose, these are the examples of the disaccharide. And maltose is made up of 2 units. Maltose is made up of alpha glucose, right? Alpha glucose monomers, and then the sucrose is made up of the alpha glucose and the beta fructose. Similarly, lactose is made up of the beta glucose and the beta गैलेक्टोज. नाउ दीज आर वेरी मच हाई यील्ड, मतलब ये तो आप लोगों को आने ही चाहिए फॉर दी एमसीक्यूज़. इफ़ यू वांट टू सॉल्व दी एमसीक्यूज़ यू शुड नो कि हमारे पास जो डाइसैकेराइड्स हैं उसकी क्या एग्जांपल्स हैं, प्लस ईच इंडिविजुअल डाइसैकेराइड्स कौन से मोनोमर से बना हुआ है, मोनोसैकेराइड्स की क्या एग्जांपल हैं, ये सब आप लोगों को आना चाहिए इफ़ यू वांट टू सॉल्व दी एमसीक्यूज़ एंड गेन मार्क्स इन इट. तो ये तो लाजमी वो चीज़ें हैं जो आप लोगों को आनी चाहिए, राइट. इसी तरह से ऑलराइट, सो बेसिकली हमने अभी तक फ़िलहाल तो ये तो कर लिया है ना कि सक्रोज हमारे पास अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज से मिलके बनता है और बीटा फ्रक्टोज से मिलके बनता है. तो हम अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज का स्ट्रक्चर देख लेते हैं. दिस इज़ द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज, और अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज में H अबव होता है. हम लोग इससे याद रख सकते हैं, जैसे अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज है तो इस A से हम लोग याद रख सकते हैं कि हाइड्रोजन जो है हमारे पास इट इज़ बेसिकली अबव द रिंग, लाइक इधर से अगर हम देखें तो अबव आ रहा है. और इसी तरह बीटा से हम लोग जो है वो बिलो कर सकते हैं, और अगर हम यहाँ से देखें तो इट इज़ बिलो, राइट. तो अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज का स्ट्रक्चर प्लस बीटा ग्लूकोज का स्ट्रक्चर वेरी मच हाई यील्ड, आप लोगों को ये आना चाहिए. इसी तरह से बीटा फ्रक्टोज का स्ट्रक्चर देख लेते हैं. दिस इज़ द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द बीटा फ्रक्टोज. OH है 1 2 3 4 5 6. इट इज़ ऑल्सो अ 6 कार्बन शुगर, राइट. एंड दिस इज़ द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ द बीटा फ्रक्टोज. अब यहाँ पे इन्होंने हमसे यही पूछा हुआ है दैट विच पेयर ऑफ मोनोसैकेराइड फॉर्म्स द सक्रोज. सो सबसे पहले वी आर गोइंग टू फाइंड द अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज, राइट. सो अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज में मैंने अभी आप लोगों को क्या बताया, H विल बी अबव. सो ये भी हमारे पास अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज है. दिस इज़ ऑल्सो द अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज. दिस इज़ नॉट द अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज, दिस इज़ द बीटा ग्लूकोज, राइट. सो हम लोग डी ऑप्शन तो वैसे ही एलिमिनेट कर देते हैं. देन लेट्स नाउ फाइंड आउट दी बीटा फ्रक्टोज, राइट. क्योंकि हमारे पास जो है ये सक्रोज वॉज बीइंग मेड अप ऑफ द अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज एंड द बीटा फ्रक्टोज, राइट. एंड देन द सक्रोज वॉज बीइंग मेड. सो लेट्स नाउ फिगर आउट दैट विच वन इज़ द बीटा fructose, right. And I can clearly see over here that this structure is the beta fructose structure. Hence the correct answer to this MCQ would be option C over here, right. अच्छा ऑलराइट. तो यहाँ पे आप लोग एक चीज़ ये भी देखें कि हमारे पास जब ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड्स बनते हैं, राइट, तो हमारे पास ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड में एक साइड से हमारे पास OH चला जाता है, राइट, और एक साइड से हमारे पास जो है वो H चला जाता है, विच मीन्स के H प्लस OH हमारे पास H2O हमारे पास जो है वो एलिमिनेट हो जाता है, राइट, और फिर हमारे पास जो है कुछ इस तरह का ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड बन जाता है लाइक दिस। ये मैंने 2 अल्फा ग्लूकोज के बीच में आपको एक ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड दिखाया हुआ है, दैट दिस इज़ बेसिकली दी ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड, एंड यहाँ पे ऑब्वियसली C है, कार्बन है। तो अगर आपको ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड की रिप्रेजेंटेशन देखनी है, सो ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड, राइट, इसकी रिप्रेजेंटेशन कैसे होगी, COC, राइट, दिस इज द रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड। सही है। So now let's move on to question number 2 over here. Question number 2 is from October-November 2020, paper 1-3, question 8. This question says that which row is correct for the carbohydrates. We have to determine that what is the monomer, what is the polymer, and what are the macromolecules over here, right? Now if I say that, let's talk about the monomers. So can we say that sucrose is a monomer? No, we cannot say sucrose as a monomer because sucrose is a disaccharide and monomers are usually monosaccharide. So monomers are usually monosaccharide. Glucose is also a monomer. It can be a monomer, right, because it is also a monosaccharide, and fructose is also a monosaccharide. So it can also be the monomer. Then if I talk about the polymers, so polymers are basically those compounds, or you can say those structures which are made up of the repeating unit of the monomers, right? So if I talk about the deoxyribose, so deoxyribose is not a monomer, right? It is a 5 carbon sugar and it is not a monomer. Amylose can be a polymer, right? Amylose, if you remember, so the starch, which was the storage polysaccharide, it was made up of the amylose and amylopectin, and these both, the amylose and amylopectin, are made up of basically the repeating units of alpha glucose, right? Amylose is a helical structure, and if I talk about amylopectin, so amylopectin is a branched structure. So amylose can also be the polymer and glycogen can also be the polymer of alpha glucose. Then if I talk about the macromolecules, so deoxyribose cannot be the macromolecule. However, cellulose can be a macromolecule. Let's look at the polysaccharides over here. You will understand it in more detail, so you will be clear about it. Okay, the polysaccharides, basically the polysaccharides are divided into 2 further types, right? Number 1 is the storage polysaccharide and number 2 is the structural polysaccharide. Now in the storage polysaccharide we are having the starch and the glycogen. Starch is a storage polysaccharide in the plants, right, and the storage polysaccharide in the animals is the glycogen. Animals, humans, right, it is the glycogen. Starch, I already told you, is made up of the amylose and amylopectin, and they are made up of the alpha glucose monomers. And if I talk about the glycogen, so glycogen is also made up of the alpha glucose monomers and it is more branched than the amylopectin. Then if I talk about the structural polysaccharide, so in the structural polysaccharide we have the most renowned example, which is the cellulose. Cellulose is a structural polysaccharide which makes up the cell wall of the plant cells, right, and it is the polymer of beta glucose, right? So we can say, and polysaccharides can be considered as the macromolecules, obviously. So we can say that cellulose is a macromolecule. So hence the correct answer for this MCQ would be option A. I hope that this MCQ is clear to all of you. Now let's move on to question number 3. Let me change the color of my pen. Let's keep it red. Now question number 3 is from May-June 2020 paper 1, 2 and question 8, right? It says that the diagram shows 3 hexoses. Now hexoses is basically the sugar which is having the 6 carbons, right? 6 carbon sugar is known as the hexose. Now they are saying that in which carbohydrates do these 3 hexoses occur, right? Now sucrose, cellulose and glycogen. We know that glycogen is a polymer, or you can say that glycogen is a polysaccharide which is made up of the alpha glucose monomer, right? अब तो हमने इतनी दफ़ा इसको डिस्कस कर लिया है कि अब तो हमें ये चीज़ याद हो गई है कि ग्लाइकोजन इज़ मेड अप ऑफ दी अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज मोनोमर्स, और मैंने अपने नोट्स में भी यहाँ पे आप लोगों को बताया है कि ग्लाइकोजन इज़ मेड अप ऑफ दी अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज मोनोमर्स. सिमिलरली इफ़ आई टॉक अबाउट सेल्यूलोज, तो सेल्यूलोज का भी हमने डिस्कस किया दैट सेल्यूलोज इज़ मेड अप ऑफ दी बीटा ग्लूकोज मोनोमर्स, राइट? बीटा ग्लूकोज मोनोमर्स. एंड इफ़ आई टॉक अबाउट दी सक्रोज, तो सक्रोज भी हमने डिस्कस किया था बहुत डिटेल में दैट सक्रोज इज़ मेड अप ऑफ दी अल्फ़ा ग्लूकोज एंड बीटा फ्रक्टोज. Now we are going to identify the structures above. I can clearly see that this structure is of the, this structure I am talking about, that this structure is of the beta fructose, right? And then if I talk about this structure over here, so H is above, so it means that it is the alpha glucose. If I talk about this structure, so the H is below, it means that it is a beta glucose. Now let's match it. We know that the alpha glucose and beta fructose, right? Let's begin with the glycogen, right? So glycogen, alpha glucose, we know that glycogen is associated with the structure 1. If I talk about cellulose, so we know that structure 3, beta glucose is structure 3, right? Beta glucose is structure 3, so cellulose will be associated with structure 3. Then if I talk about sucrose, so sucrose is made up of alpha glucose, 1 can also be there and 2 can also be there, which is the beta fructose. According to the options given, we will consider the beta fructose in the sucrose, right? So hence the correct answer over here would be option C. I hope that you have got this MCQ and it is clear to all of you. I have made my best efforts to explain you this MCQ, so I hope that it is understandable to all of you. Alright, so now let's move on to question 4 over here, which is from May-June 20 paper 1 to question 9. This question says that the diagram shows the part of a chemical structure of a naturally occurring polysaccharide, right? So this is a structure, they have shown it, and then they are saying that what types of the glycosidic bonds are present. So we are going to determine it on the basis of our knowledge. First we are going to label the, or you can say the number the ring over here, like we number it from here 1 2 3 4 5 and then 6, right? And then if I talk about this structure 1 2 3 4 5 and then 6. Obviously if I talk about the single structure as well, जो कि ये है for example, तो इसमें भी मैं इसी तरह से नंबरिंग करूँगी 1 2 3 4 5 6. बेसिकली जहाँ से ये O से जो कार्बन करीब है ना, ये वाला, यहाँ से नंबरिंग हमारी स्टार्ट होती है एंड इट्स कन्वेंशनल, ठीक है? तो यहाँ पे आप लोग अगर देखें, सो द बॉन्ड्स विच आर प्रेजेंट आर बेसिकली बिटवीन विच नंबर, राइट? तो इस तरह से हम लोग ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड्स अपने बनाएंगे 1 2 3 4 5 6, right? Now basically one bond is being formed, one glycosidic bond is being formed between the carbon number 1 over here and the carbon number 4 over here. So basically this is the 1,4 glycosidic bond, right? अब हम ये चीज़ बाद में डिटरमाइन करेंगे कि अल्फ़ा 1,4 है कि बीटा 1,4 है, ठीक है? Now if I talk about over here in this one, so यहाँ पे हमारे पास the glycosidic bond is basically formed between the carbon number 1 and carbon number 3. So basically the glycosidic bond which is being formed is between 1 and 3. अब हम ये चीज़ भी डिटरमाइन कर लेते हैं कि जो है हमारे पास अल्फ़ा स्ट्रक्चर है ये, या फिर ये हमारे पास बीटा स्ट्रक्चर है. अब ऑल राइट, यहाँ पे आप लोग देख सकते हैं कि O ऊपर है. सो हमारे पास ये स्ट्रक्चर बेसिकली कुछ ऐसा था जो हमने ऊपर भी डिस्कस किया था, OH एंड H, राइट? तो यहाँ पे अगर आप लोग देखें तो H हमारे पास इज़ बिलो, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस स्ट्रक्चर, राइट। यहाँ से अगर उन्होंने H हटा दिया है, राइट, इन्होंने यहाँ से H हटा दिया है, और यहाँ से अगर यहाँ पे नीचे जो OH था ना, इन्होंने वो वाला OH हटा दिया है, नीचे था या ऊपर था whatever, लेकिन यहाँ से इन्होंने H हटाया, वहाँ से इन्होंने OH हटाया, लेकिन आप O की पोजीशन से अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि ऊपर OH ग्रुप ही होगा, राइट। और अगर ऊपर OH ग्रुप है तो नीचे H ग्रुप होगा, और अगर H नीचे है तो हमारे पास जो है वो क्या होगा, ये वाला बॉन्ड बीटा 1,3 ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड हो जाएगा ये, राइट। इट वुड बी बीटा 1,3 ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड। तो बीटा 1,3 कर लेते हैं। एंड देन इफ़ आई टॉक अबाउट ओवर हेयर ऑफ दिस स्ट्रक्चर, तो यहाँ पे हमारे पास इट्स अ लिटिल कन्फ्यूजिंग, क्योंकि यहाँ पे हमारे पास जो है वो काफ़ी एक डिफरेंट तरीके से बॉन्ड दिया हुआ है। आई बिलीव इट वुड बी ऑल्सो बीटा 1,4 ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड ही होगा, बिकॉज हमारे पास ऑब्वियसली अगर एक आंसर हमारे पास बीटा 1,3 आ गया है तो इसके अलावा हमारे पास कोई और ऑप्शन नहीं है। सो इट वुड बी मोस्ट प्रोबेबली द बीटा 1,4 glycosidic bond, right? So hence the correct answer for this MCQ is option C. Right, G, now let's move on to question number 5 over here, which is from May-June 2020, paper 1-1, question 7. It says that maltose and sucrose are the disaccharides. Maltose is formed when two molecules of glucose join together, right? While sucrose is formed from the fructose and glucose. Which row shows the molecular formula of two disaccharides? Alright, we know that the basic formula for the glucose is C6H12O6, and if I talk about the general formula for the carbohydrate, so it is CXH2OX, right? Now we know that maltose and sucrose, they both are made up of the sugars which are hexose, right? 6 carbon sugar. We know that glucose is also a 6 carbon sugar. So 6 plus 6, we know that it is having the 12 carbons, right? And we know that one water molecule will be subtracted from the molecule of maltose. Why? Because as you know कि यहाँ पे if I draw two glucose molecules and this is the glycosidic bond over here. So whenever the glycosidic bond is made, we know that from one side the H is gone, right, and from the other side OH goes, so it eliminates the water and then the glycosidic bond is formed. So what we are going to do is that let X be 12, right, H2O 12 minus 1 11, C12 H11, C12H not 11, sorry, 22, because it is 2 over here, right, and O11, right. And similarly for the sucrose also it would be the same. Why? Because sucrose is also made up of the two monosaccharides which are the 6 carbon sugars. I hope that you are getting what I am trying to explain over here. So hence the correct answer over here would be option A, C12H22O11. And for both the maltose and sucrose, the formula will remain the same. Why? Because the sugars which are used to make these disaccharides are the 6 carbon sugars. I hope that this MCQ is clear to all of you. Let's now move on to question 6, which is from May-June 2020, paper 1-3, question 7. It says that which polysaccharide contains 1,4 and 1,6 glycosidic bonds? If I talk about amylose and amylopectin, they both makes up the starch over here, right? If I talk about the cellulose over here, we know that cellulose is a structural polysaccharide, right? And glycogen is a storage polysaccharide in the animals and humans, right? So basically they are saying that among all of these, which contains the alpha 1,4 and alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. So let's talk about amylose and amylopectin over here first, right? Alright, so basically the starch which was made up of the amylose and amylopectin, let's look at the structure of the amylose. This is the structure of the amylose. The amylose is a straight chain structure. It does not have any branches, and as the subunits of alpha glucose, because the amylose and amylopectin both are made up of the alpha glucose monomers. So as these monomers are joined together, these subunits of the alpha glucose are joined together. So what happens is that a bond is formed, and this bond which is formed is the 1,4 glycosidic bond. Alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond is found in the amylose, and the structure which is branched is the amylopectin. It is a branch structure. You guys can see that this is a chain, right? And then over here the branches are being made. Now if the branches are being made, where the branches are being made, so over there is the alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond over there, right? In the straight chain there would be the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond, right? And the point where they are branching, at this point it will be alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. And similarly, if I talk about the glycogen as well, so we know that glycogen also have a straight chain, right? And then that straight chain is branched. So at the straight chain it will be having alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond, and at the branch it would be having alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. So I think we have got about the amylopectin. So amylopectin contain both the alpha 1,4 and alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. Amylopectin was the branch structure. And if I talk about the amylose, so amylose contain only alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond. It does not contain alpha 1,6. So let's eliminate the option 2 over here. And then if we talk about the cellulose, so cellulose only contain beta 1,4 glycosidic bond, right? Beta 1,4 glycosidic bond, and it does not contain 1,6 bond. So let's eliminate this as well. And if I talk about the glycogen, so we know that glycogen is a branch structure, and in the straight chain, as the alpha glucose monomers combine, it will give alpha 1,4, and in the branched it will give alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. So the correct answer over here would be option B, 1 and 4. Amylopectin and glycogen contains both the alpha 1,4 and alpha 1,6 glycosidic bond. So now let's move on to question 7, which is from October-November 19, paper 1-3, question 7. It says that what occurs during the formation of the glycosidic bond between the two alpha glucose molecules. Alright, so they are asking between the two alpha glucose molecules. Basically the glycosidic bond is this bond, COC, right? We know that we have already discussed it earlier as well, that this is the glycosidic bond. Let me explain it to you by the help of a image. Is the glucose, alpha glucose and the fructose. The concept is same, so I am going to explain you by this diagram. This is the diagram I got. Basically OH from one sugar will go and H from the other sugar will go from the OH group, and then what will happen, that the O will come in between and the glycosidic bond will be formed over here like this, right? So the water molecule is eliminated, right? H plus OH will give you the water molecule H2O. So H and OH are eliminated, which means that a water molecule is eliminated. So what we can say, that a water molecule is always formed? No, a water molecule is eliminated. It is not formed. Alpha 1,4 is always formed. A hydrogen bond is always formed? No, this is not a hydrogen bond. A hydroxyl group is always formed? No, the hydroxyl group is not formed. Alpha 1,4 is always formed. Them के 1,4 हमारे पास बन रहा है कि नहीं? 1 2 3 4, right? 1 2 3 4. So if I talk about an OH group from this molecule and an H group from this molecule, so what will happen, that eventually 1,4 alpha 1,4 glycosidic bond will always be formed if the glycosidic bond is formed between the two alpha glucose molecules, right? So hence option A is our correct answer, that a 1,4 bond is always formed, right? अच्छा, ये वाली जो डायग्राम थी, आई ओनली एक्सप्लेन इट टू यू कि ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड कैसे बनता है, ठीक है? इस रेफरेंस से मैंने आप लोगों को बस ये एक्सप्लेन करना था कि ग्लाइकोसिडिक बॉन्ड हाउ इट इज़ मेड, राइट? क्वेश्चन में आप लोग देख लें कि अल्फा ग्लूकोज मॉलिक्यूल्स की बात की गई है. दैट्स व्हाई आई टुक यू टू अनदर स्लाइड एंड देन आई एक्सप्लेन इट टू यू गाइस, राइट? सो आई होप दैट इट इज़ क्लियर टू ऑल ऑफ यू. अब हमारे पास जो है वो 8, 9, 10 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 ये वाले सवाल हमारे पास बच गए, राइट. दीज आर लेफ्ट. अब जो है इन द नेक्स्ट वीडियो बेसिकली आई एम गोइंग टू कवर the remaining questions of biological molecules, topical MCQs of carbohydrate, right? I hope that you guys enjoyed solving these past paper MCQs with me, and if you guys did, do consider subscribing this channel and also share this video with your friends so that they can benefit from it as well. Do remember me in your prayers that may Allah bless my journey and may Allah shower his countless blessings on me. Thank you so much everyone. Your support and your prayers means a lot to me. Allah Hafiz everyone. See you next time in the next video.